Throw it up. Start twerking like Miley. Oh yeah, twerking like Miley.
Alright guys, here we have it. This is the Huawei P20 Pro in probably the best colour of the bunch. This is the Twilight version, which is pretty much the first time in modern smartphone history that a company has had a two-tone gradient finish. The retail box is slick. I like the contrast of the metallic text with the matte white finish, but it's not one of Huawei's more elaborate packages. And the first thing you're going to see is the smartphone, which of course we're going to come on to in just a second, but let's see what's below that first. Following the insert, we've got a chunky box below that, which contains right on top the SIM ejector tool, and inside is going to contain some manuals in the final retail release. And thankfully, we've also got a USB Type-C Huawei supercharger, which in our battery charging tests was second only to the OnePlus phones, and that was only very slightly. Following this, we've got some reasonable looking earphones, but I wouldn't say it's close to what you find in the Galaxy S9 box. And the last item here is a USB Type-C to headphone jack adapter, because unfortunately the phone is skipping the headphone jack. So we got to take the screen protector off the front, and something I was perhaps even more excited to do this time was take the one off the back, because this is the Twilight finish. And it's beautiful. This is constructed almost exclusively out of glass and is structured in a way so that it looks different in almost every lighting condition. It's pretty reminiscent of my favourite colour on the Galaxy S9, which is the lilac purple, but in a way this is even more eye-catching. This gradient is a really brave decision by the company, and it's definitely not going to be forever on, but I think they've pulled it off about as well as they could have. Something else I also noticed when I picked the phones up for the first time is both the P20 and the P20 Pro are quite a bit slimmer than I was expecting. And when you combine this with seamless curved edges, the way the back blends into the sides of the phone, which blends into the front of the phone, in a way, it's actually less interrupted as a shape than Samsung's flagship, which becomes even more impressive when you consider that they've managed to fit a 4000 mAh battery inside. That's more than the S9, more than the S9 Plus, and actually the same as the Mate 10s last year, which were much bulkier phones. This new glass construction also comes with the advantage of IP67 water resistance, but my only gripe with this finish are the fingerprints. And yes, you can expect fingerprints on any phone that has a glass back, but because of the shiny, reflective, metallic finish behind the glass on this phone, it's even more pronounced. Okay, so after my initial time spent with the phone, I can safely say the Huawei P20 has the potential to be a revolutionary smartphone. And there are two key areas it stands out: camera hardware and artificial intelligence, which has many implications for the user experience, speed, and also ties into the camera. But before we even get to that, the company has taken a pretty unusual direction with the phone's display. They call this a full view display for obvious reasons, and it is a 6.1-inch 18.7:9 aspect ratio screen, which makes it very slightly taller than the S9 phones, but the resolution here is significantly lower. We've got 2240 by 1080, which is more comparable to phones like the OnePlus 5T, a much cheaper device. Not to say it's bad, it's definitely sharp enough, and OLED tech gives us a kick in the contrast department, but it's just not outstanding. And you've also probably been drawn to the notch at the top, a trend that people haven't exactly been the most receptive to. But it does mean the top bezel, generally speaking, is quite a lot slimmer than competing phones, but unfortunately this is compensated for by the phone's slightly larger than average chin. So it's not a bad phone in terms of screen to body ratio, but again, it's not breaking new ground in this area. If you really don't like the notch, the company has a pretty strange option here to disable it entirely, adding a black bar there instead. And thankfully, there's a lot of flexibility here with the navigation bar. They allow you to change the arrangement of buttons, the number of buttons, and also disable it entirely, after which all applications become completely full screen and you can access all the commands just using the fingerprint scanner on the front. Alright, that's all well and good, but one thing that made me a little bit nervous about these devices was the power. Now 4 plus 6 gigs of RAM depending on the model is great, but the Kirin 970 is Huawei's 2017 flagship chip. It feels very fast though, and this responsiveness is most likely down to the AI capabilities, an area where the Kirin 970 does in fact trump other, even 2018 system-on-a chips. In its current state though, AI on these phones will only really help in apps that it's been programmed to, so you'll feel it in the UI, the camera, etc. But in terms of gaming performance, it will lag behind. Alright, now that we've touched on the camera, we've got to talk about it, because it's special both in terms of its hardware and its software. And as you can probably tell, this phone is a world first. We have not one, not two, but 3 rear sensors, we've got a 20 megapixel monochrome one, a 40 megapixel RGB sensor, and also an 8 megapixel telephoto one. Okay, whoa, let's just back up a second, because yes, this means, number one, you can take 40 megapixel photos. Number two, the telephoto lens gives you up to 3 times optical zoom effectively. And the P20 Pro is also packing 4-in-1 hybrid focus, which sounds excessive for a smartphone, but safe to say this phone feels like a machine gun in terms of how fast it can capture photos. But it goes further because the camera also has a software aspect, which takes AI, as seen in the Mate 10, and really starts to flex itself a little bit. We've got AI-based stabilization, focus tracking, which keeps track of objects that are moving and also predicts where they're going to be moving to keep them in focus. And Huawei has built on the foundations of the Mate 10 in terms of its ability to recognize objects and create color profiles accordingly. The P20 and the P20 Pro, they recognize a wider variety of objects. They recognize them faster, and they also apply the color effects almost instantaneously. And the P20 Pro seems to be in a different league altogether when it comes to recognizing and responding to faces, i.e. portrait mode. I compared very briefly with the S9 Plus, video coming tomorrow hopefully with a little bit more detail on this, and it blew it away. And talk about excessive cameras, this also has a 24 megapixel front camera, which from my initial testing looks a little bit on the soft side and is probably not going to use that sensor to its limit. Alright, so as you can probably tell, we've barely scratched the surface of the Huawei P20, but as a bit of an initial summary, Huawei is pitching this phone as a fusion of art and technology. And in terms of its design and its camera, it's certainly pushing the boundary out. And so far, from a first impression, it seems to be a consolidated experience, whilst also being brave and refreshing. And that is something we were yet to see in 2018 so far. So don't forget to smash that subscribe button for tomorrow's P20 Pro versus Galaxy S9